Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Good Boxing Podcast with your host, Josh Size. It's been a minute, but before I make the prognostication that I'm going to make about the Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo Alvarez fight, I wanted to completely immerse myself into the fight. I thought I was really well versed in a lot of the fights that I remember watching, but upon literally taking 8 to 9 days of just watching nothing but Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders, I've finally come to a conclusion. Now, before I make the statement that I'm going to make, I really did a lot of research, and it's going to be controversial. Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders takes place this Saturday at AT&T Stadium. I'm going to actually be there, and I'm really excited for this fight. It's in Texas, and I'm glad that I'm actually fortunate and able to go. So, pandemic's coming to kind of an end where I'm at, and it's kind of good to see that certain things are kind of opening up. And to me, I think this might be the biggest event since the entire pandemic started. So I'm really excited to see more or less how it's going to be in a stadium with 70,000 people all cheering on the pound for pound number one fighter in the world. So I'm going to sit here and preface that I think Canelo Alvarez deservingly is the pound for pound number one fighter in the world. And I'm just going to be honest with you, it's clear. However, before I sit here and tell you what's going to be looked at as blasphemy, foolery, ridiculousness, trolling. Mm-mm. I'm going to sit here and tell you that stylistically, I'm going to be honest with you, you're going to see Canelo Alvarez in one of the hardest fights he's had, I think, possibly since Lara. And the reason why I'm saying that is I looked way back. I mean, I went through the entire Canelo Alvarez catalog after Floyd Mayweather Jr. And losing to Floyd Mayweather Jr. is no knock on you. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is a fantastic fighter. He's slick. You are young. We already know all the stories. But it was the first time that it was shown to the world that Canelo Alvarez struggles with someone that can move, box, and someone who's trying to plant his feet, really generate power with those hooks and right hands. So I'm going to sit here and tell you that Canelo Alvarez got a little bit exposed in that fight, but Floyd Mayweather exposes a lot of different people. And now this isn't about that fight because I'm going to be honest with you, it was a long time ago. He was young, very long time ago. But then Arislandi Lara exposed one that Canelo does struggle with movers. And he did struggle with a very tricky lefty. If you look back at that fight, Lara really did give a good account of himself. Originally, when I watched it, I thought Lara actually won the fight, clearly, in my opinion. But upon rewatching, the fight was really close. And I could see a draw or Lara slightly winning by one. But I could also see the other side. I thought Canelo did a lot of good work to the body. He was countering and catching Lara pretty soundly sometimes. And Lara, to his detriment, and something that's been a part of his entire career, he does kind of lack output. Sometimes it's hard to score around for Lara if you land two left hands. Is that enough to win the fight? And when you have Canelo pressing forward, pressing the action, and if you're a judge and you don't like the way Lara fights, it may be hard for him to get a decision. But the problem presented itself that if you box Canelo, you move around and don't try to engage in inside warfare with our, especially now, the pound for pound number one fighter in the world, you can have some sort of success. And that's what Lara showed. One thing I didn't realize, and actually I did realize it, but it just happens to be the case. Since that fight, the Lara fight, Canelo Alvarez has not fought a lefty at all. And you think, oh wow, that's like kind of a interesting fact, but he hasn't fought a lefty since Arislandi Lara. So that fight took place almost 8 years ago. And since then, he has not engaged in a battle with the lefty. So immediately, I know you see the highlights of Callum Smith. I know you see the highlights of Daniel Jacobs. I know you've fallen in love with the new and improved Canelo. Beautiful head movement. I'm a fan too. That performance against Callum Smith after a year off was remarkable. When you see the clip of Daniel Jacobs throwing a bunch of combinations and Canelo Alvarez's head movement has become one of the most trended searches for boxing when it comes to Canelo. When you type in Canelo, the first thing you see on the YouTube search is Canelo head movement. And it's phenomenal. You're watching someone in the prime of their career mature and constantly get better fight after fight. And I totally agree with you that he is number one pound for pound, deserves to be paid the most, probably the biggest star in boxing right now. And again, I would agree with you. However, stylistically, you have to ask a question that has not been answered yet. Can Canelo Alvarez beat a lefty that not only is tricky, can switch, but has elite movement? When I'm saying elite movement, Billy Joe Saunders could dance around that ring. And I have not seen Canelo Alvarez in with a beast like Billy Joe Saunders, not since Erislandy Lara. And even in that case, the reason why I say this is even a more difficult and dangerous fight is Erislandy Lara doesn't want to engage, goes full on retreat, sets counters. He hit Canelo with a lot of left hands, right? But Billy Joe Saunders possesses something that I think is a wild card. One, Billy Joe, honestly, and I can sit here and say, really does not respect Canelo. He's the first opponent in, I want to say, 8 or 9 years, right? Since Floyd Mayweather, because Floyd Mayweather was talking his trash and he didn't respect Canelo Alvarez. He's like, this kid's a young kid. He can't mess with me. It wasn't the Canelo of the old days where people gave him praise. And yes, he was a young stud, but he wasn't proven. Since Canelo has become Canelo, nobody has spoken to or treated Canelo the way that Billy Joe Saunders has. And the mind games, you see him talking about the ring. You see Canelo Alvarez visibly annoyed with Billy Joe Saunders. And I think Billy Joe right now is out to prove something to the whole world that he doesn't give a F about Canelo Alvarez. He doesn't care if he's the pound for pound. He sees just another man in front of him that's shorter than him, smaller than him, and he doesn't feel better than him. He respects him as a fighter, as a lot of fighters respect other fighters, because to get in that ring again is something very, very difficult and very few do it. But in terms of boxing skills, he sees a man in front of him that's going to come forward, try to knock his head off, and he's seen it before. So Billy Joe Saunders right now really doesn't respect Canelo. I think he's the first guy since, again, Mayweather to really, really not give a fuck if Canelo Alvarez is Canelo Alvarez. And to me, that's the X factor. I want to see this when two champions fight each other. I don't want to see, hey, we're going to have a good fight. Let's see who's going to win. I know it's brash. I know it's annoying, obnoxious, but Billy Joe Saunders truthfully believes he's going to beat Canelo Alvarez. He's not like Callum Smith that was like, oh, yeah, I'm really, really humble for the opportunity. Billy Joe Saunders, and if you don't know a lot about travelers, is a traveling man. He doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about fame. He doesn't care about all these things. He's truthfully going to say what he feels. He reminds me of a middleweight Tyson Fury, and that's where I'm kind of going with this. 6 or 7 years ago, there was a fight that happened between Tyson Fury and Vladimir Klitschko. Klitschko fought in 02, packed stadium. There was a bunch of fans. No one really thought that Tyson Fury had a shot against Vladimir Klitschko, this tall, herky-jerky, awkward fighter, gypsy man, traveling man. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but another traveling man. He went into 02 and shocked the world. He gave Vladimir Klitschko a boxing lesson, switched on him. You saw the physicality be an issue where he couldn't deal with the fact that this guy was longer than him. He couldn't just jab and fall in. And you saw deficiencies in Vladimir Klitschko's game that other people could not physically show. And now I'm going to land the plane with why I give the comparison. Canelo Alvarez clearly is pound for pound number one. Clearly, he is an amazing boxer. Yes, but the showcase and the body of work that I've seen for the last few fights is the same archetype of fighter. You have a tall, bigger, physically strong man trying to knock Canelo Alvarez out, and yet similar plod footed. No one really tried to move on Canelo Alvarez the way that Billy Joe is going to move. When you see someone do it in a limited fashion, you started to see some sort of resistance and some sort of struggling in terms of tactics, right? Rewind. Movers. The last mover that Canelo Alvarez kind of fought, and he's a hybrid. And honestly, Daniel Jacobs is a great boxer. I do think he's very, very, very talented. I think when he always steps up to the peak, the Triple Gs and the Canelos, the top tier opponents, he seems to fall a little short. And in this fight was no difference, right? No different. Canelo Alvarez started faster, was kind of leading the pace, and then Daniel Jacobs struggled. Canelo Alvarez was using that superior head movement. He was getting out the way of a lot of shots that Daniel Jacobs would throw, but he seemed to kind of not really have confidence in what he was doing. And that's a testament to Canelo. Someone's making you miss and then they're making you pay. It makes you hesitant to punch. However, a lot of people fail to realize Daniel Jacobs lost 115, 113 on two judges' scorecards and 116, 112 on another card. It was a close fight. No one really knew 100% who was going to win the fight. And some people felt Daniel Jacobs won the fight. And the reason being is I know you see the head movement clips, but did you watch the end of the round? Did you watch the next round? Did you watch the last two rounds where Daniel Jacobs started to have some success? He started shifting and landing that left hook from the lefty position. He started going to Canelo's body instead of head hunting, where Canelo's head movement's going to work. Canelo gets hit to the body, as you saw in the Triple G fight. Sure, he backed him up, but there are opportunities there for body shots with Canelo. When he moved, when he used his lateral movement, you saw Canelo moving his head and getting out the way. But Canelo has to lunge in and really sit on his shots because he's trying to close a gap. And when you're physically bigger than someone and you're moving backwards, you have to take a chance. And I think Daniel Jacobs did a kind of show that there were certain things that could work against Canelo Alvarez. Then to expound on that, look at the Sergey Kovalev fight. What a lot of people don't realize is Sergey Kovalev, yes, he was a power puncher. Yes, he was feared. But the Kovalev that he fought wasn't the same Kovalev that fought Andre Ward in the first fight. He wasn't even the Sergey Kovalev that fought Andre Ward in the second fight. Not even the Sergey Kovalev that fought Alvarez. So after that Anthony Yard fight where he barely survived, right? He no longer had the confidence and kind of the demeanor, and to hop into a fight after taking a lot of damage to fight Alvarez, I feel like he gave a good account of himself. And what did he use? Buddy McGirt seems to be onto something and realize something that if you get low with Canelo, don't elevate yourself, right? Make yourself low and long, use your jab. Don't even think to hit. Think of using the left to find and locate where Canelo is and keep him at bay, right? Because when you're moving your head, you have to plod your feet. You can inch forward, but if you're taller and you take that step back, you create space for yourself and you could create safety for yourself. Now, Kovalev clearly is not a good inside fighter, and that was his detriment. Because if Kovalev could have fought a little better on the inside, keeping Canelo at bay and keeping him struggling the entire time, when he got inside and just did a little decently, he could have potentially won the fight. It was a close fight. Look back and really, really look at it. Sure, the judges didn't have it, and he ended up knocking him out when he knocked him out. But what if that doesn't happen with Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders? Billy Joe Saunders is not going to shell up and keep his hands up and sitting there with Canelo Alvarez, he's looking to move, use that jab, make him miss, and then maybe potentially counter him. The rings thing. A lot of people are trying to say that Billy Joe Saunders is scared and all these mentionings of the ring and whatnot. I personally love the fact that he's being annoying about it. Honestly, more and more that I think about it, and I wanted to break down into this fight because he is fucking with Canelo. And mentally, you have to fuck with a guy. I mean, come on, let's be honest. You talk shit to a guy, make him angry, make him want to make a mistake, make him want to punch a throw through your face. You want him to be mad, and then you could counter him potentially. Then you can make him run into something that, if he was patient and calm, that he normally wouldn't run into. And then I look back at the Callum Smith fight, and people are going to be very, very annoyed at this. But if you look at that fight with Callum Smith hit him with punches. But tactically, Callum Smith is not someone who is a fleet-footed boxer who boxes on his back foot. Callum Smith is a gunslinger, and he's looking for someone to run into his shots when he goes forward, right? He's trying to back someone up. Now, come on, Callum Smith isn't going to back up Canelo Alvarez. On the inside, I'm not going to sit here and say Billy Joe Saunders isn't a good fighter on the inside, but he's not going to outbox Canelo on the inside. Come on, that's his domain. Mexican style is predicated on good defense while being on the inside and great body work and a good kind of cadence of being close, and you break and eventually make your opponent melt from the pressure. But Callum Smith fought the dumbest fight possibly for a 6'3" man. He was backing up against the ropes, and he was trying to lean on the ropes against Canelo Alvarez. You're a big boy. Your torso's big. You have to protect that body, right? But sitting against the ropes with your hands up, shelling up like this, Canelo's going to find the opening, either to the head or to the body. He's too good for that. But what Callum did show is, in the middle of the ring, use that jab, stay low, go to Canelo's body and circle. There was pockets where he had some success, and you saw Canelo struggle for a moment, but then Canelo, being the incredible fighter that he is, cut the gap, shut it down, and then Canelo really never let him get back in that range. And that's a testament to ring generalship. Rocky Fielding, another big guy, right, at 168, fought very similar. Hands up, trying to like fight with Canelo, be the bigger man. That's not going to beat Canelo Alvarez. When you're the best boxer in the world, you got to fight someone that's a better boxer than you. And Billy Joe Saunders, in terms of pure boxing ability, traditionally, in terms of movement, switching, being a complete fighter, using your jab and not focusing on power shots, Billy Joe Saunders is right there with Canelo Alvarez. He hasn't fought the Cottos of the world. He hasn't fought the Mayweathers of the world. He hasn't fought the highest level of the highest level. But how are we going to know if Billy Joe Saunders is a world-class fighter until he fights a world-class fighter? So that's another wild card that a lot of people aren't really giving him. We don't know what the best Billy Joe Saunders is. People are going to cite that he struggled against Coceres on that undercard of KSI and Logan Paul. But what people fail to realize was Billy Joe Saunders fought someone who had fought someone that literally had a shitty record. He was like 5-7 or something of that nonsense. And Coceres was unproven, undefeated, but it was for a world title. And Billy Joe Saunders honestly didn't wake up for that fight. He was out of shape. It was his first time in America. He was out there trying to make a statement like, hey, I'm this knockout artist and I'm trying to knock this kid out. I'm trying to knock this kid out. And he put a lot of pressure on himself to not do what Billy Joe Saunders does. He was with Dominic Engel. I didn't like the way he looked. He had no rhythm. He really didn't have a pep in his step. He didn't look motivated. He looked out of shape. And clearly, to make 168, he just thought he was going to wake up for Coceres, and Coceres probably fought the last good fight of his life. He gave him some awkwardness, and he didn't have a good performance. And I'll be the first one to say that during that fight, I immediately disqualified Billy Joe from ever beating Canelo. But then I watched the Martin Murray and Billy Joe Saunders fight. Now, him and Tibbs, I wasn't sure why he left Ben Davison. I was a little shocked. I thought Ben Davison and Billy Joe were a good team. But then I looked at the Tibbs fight. I mean, Tibbs coaching Billy Joe for the Martin Murray fight. I don't know if you look back at that fight, but Billy Joe looks fantastic. And he boxed his socks off. And it really did look like a dress rehearsal for the Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders fight. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see Billy Joe looking any sharper than he did unless it's for Canelo. He got to get that hands up movement where someone's trying to plot forward, go forward, try to break you down. And Billy Joe Saunders just picked him apart. I saw sharpness. I saw good feinting. I saw good rhythm. I saw great body work. And most specifically, what I did like was an emphasis on good inside safe fighting. I like the fact that he got rugged with Martin Murray, put his head on his chest. He really was safe defensively. And it looked legitimately like a dress rehearsal for the Canelo fight. Now, Canelo isn't Martin Murray. He's not going to give you that. He's not that straight up. But Canelo Alvarez has been prepared for almost a year plus. He was supposed to fight Canelo Alvarez prior to the pandemic. He was supposed to fight Canelo Alvarez several times, and it just seemed like bad luck kept happening. Then he ended up fighting Callum Smith and Avni Yildirim, and Billy Joe Saunders ended up fighting a tune-up fight with Martin Murray. He was supposed to prepare for Canelo Alvarez, and he looked sharp. And the fact that he went to Tibbs, Billy Joe Saunders with Tibbs, I'm loving the combination. And more I'm starting to believe. I don't think Canelo Alvarez is going to get knocked out. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's an easy fight, but I think the nightmare scenario is going to occur on May 8th. I think Billy Joe Saunders is going to have a fast, furious start. He's going to get a lot of rounds in the bank early. Canelo Alvarez is going to get impatient. And I think he's going to have his moments where he develops this tremendous lead. And Canelo's going to have to overextend himself. And I just don't think he's going to knock Billy Joe Saunders out. I just don't see it. And if I'm wrong, so be it. But I didn't start this podcast to give a wishy-washy answer like other people do. I don't want to sit here and just say, oh, why do you think Canelo is going to beat Billy Joe Saunders? Oh, Canelo's head movement. Okay. Did he do that against a lefty in the last 8 years? No. Oh, Canelo is Canelo. That's not an answer for why he's going to beat Billy Joe Saunders. I need evidence, and I want to see evidence as to, has he addressed this issue? Has he addressed the lefty issue? Has he addressed someone that's moving on him the entire fight, not really looking to engage and use size as the only way they can win? No. And I feel like Billy Joe Saunders is the first fighter in a very long time that presents all of the things that we have not seen answered yet. An elite lefty who's not going to sit there and just have a fighter's chance or a puncher's chance of winning. And at this point, I'm making a definitive statement. I think Billy Joe Saunders is going to win a very close decision. And I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist. I know people think that Canelo Alvarez cannot lose a decision, but I think he's going to clearly win the fight. And he's just going to beat Canelo. I think it's a bad time for Canelo Alvarez. I think right now he has all the pressure on him. 168, he still hasn't fought someone like Billy Joe at 168. Billy Joe Saunders is the same size. I don't think size is going to be a difference. Speed-wise, agility-wise, I don't see Canelo with a tremendous advantage over Billy Joe Saunders. And watch round 6 of Billy Joe and Martin Murray. Watch round 10 of Billy Joe and Martin Murray, and you'll see what he's trying to institute for the fight. I like the fact that he fights with his hands down, uses little quick jabs, little feints that are going to set Canelo's head movement in motion. And Canelo tends to plot a little bit. And with movement, it's a big ring now, 22 feet. Can he dance around the ring the whole time? He looks in shape. He's taking this shit seriously. And I think this is the nightmare scenario for Canelo Alvarez. He's mad. He's upset. He has all the pressure. Pound for pound, number one. He's trying to be a unified, undisputed champion. And you know how these undisputed things work. Sometimes the narrative does not happen the way you want it to. That's why it's so hard to be undisputed. And that's why Teofimo and other fighters need to be lauded when they do it. Because one, negotiations wise, it's hard already. But truthfully, it's hard because you fight champions. You're not fighting bums anymore. You're not fighting, I hate saying bums, you're not fighting the creme de la creme. So when I look at the evidence, and I have to look at the evidence, I don't want to hear Canelo is Canelo or Canelo team and Eddie Reynoso this. Yeah, until that question is answered, we cannot not ask the question. So the question is, can Canelo neutralize what Billy Joe Saunders does? And if he answers it, then I was wrong. But I didn't, again, get into this to give you, oh, Canelo is Canelo. I show so much respect. He's gotten better. He's gotten better against bigger righties and people that fight similarly. But I haven't seen him fight a lefty that can move, switch, bang with him on the inside if need be, tie him up, is crafty, right? Knows a lot of tricks. It's not going to be Callum Smith that looked like Bambi out there when Canelo started banging on his arm and then he's leaning against the ropes against potentially the best inside fighter in the game. I'm hoping not to see that. And if Canelo does that to Billy Joe, then he's addressed the question. But until then, he has to prove that he can handle this. And I think on Saturday, I just don't think he's going to crack the Billy Joe Saunders code. This guy's locked in. He doesn't give a fuck. And it kind of reminds me of when Loma got pissed off at Teofimo. He fought a shitty fight. He was like, oh, I'm going to take him into deep waters. And sometimes you take someone into deep waters and they know how to hold their breath for 12 rounds. So I'm going to sit here and tell you Billy Joe Saunders is going to win this fight. That's my prognostication. I don't take anything away from Canelo. I just think I haven't seen anyone really move on Canelo like that. And I saw it against Daniel Jacobs. He did struggle with it when Jacobs decided to move. And he did struggle with the southpaw stance when Jacobs utilized it. I think Billy Joe Saunders can fight both lefty and righty proficiently. And over 12 rounds, 70,000 people rooting against you reminds me of the middleweight Tyson Fury versus Klitschko fight, where instead of Klitschko, you got Canelo Alvarez in America, first big event since COVID. I don't know what it, I just think Billy Joe is going to take this moment and execute. So that's the episode for today. I think Billy Joe's superior movement is going to present a lot of issues for Canelo Alvarez. If you look back at that Lara fight, we don't know if anyone can present the problems that Billy Joe Saunders presents in the gym, because Ryan Garcia's brother is not that. You can't get lefties that do what Billy Joe Saunders does at this level. And in my opinion, Billy Joe's only going to resurrect that fire in his life to prepare for this fight. And I like him being edgy. I like him talking trash. I like the lack of respect. And Canelo Alvarez is not God. He struggles. Look at the Daniel Jacobs fight. It was a close fight. Look at the Kovalev fight. He lost a lot of rounds. Yes, he beat Callum Smith. Yes, he beat Avni Yildirim. Yes, he looks spectacular against a lot of other guys, but they fought the same. They didn't move. They weren't lefties. They were showing tremendous respect. They were happy for the opportunity. And Billy Joe Saunders is not happy for the opportunity of a payday, right? Sure, the money, okay, he probably cares about it. I know anyone could say they don't care about it, but come on, let's be honest. But he wants to prove he's the best. And I have not seen that since Teofimo Lopez and Lomachenko, where Teo was like, look, I don't care who you are. You're not God. I box just like you. You bleed just like me. And I think Billy Joe Saunders is going to pull off this upset for that reason. You have Tyson Fury in there in his corner. He has someone that can help him deal with the moment, teach him a lot of tricks, because Billy Joe is crafty. And I got to sit here and say, I'm so excited for this fight. Well, if you like the video, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, etc. But I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't start this podcast again to just not give you a legitimate answer of my prediction without extensive research. Canelo being Canelo is not an answer for me. Canelo got better against righties and taller opponents. He has really good head movement, good counterpunching. But until I see it against a high level lefty, you have to ask a question that has not been answered yet. So my answer is I don't know if he can do it. And I think Billy Joe Saunders is the worst opponent possible to try to exercise those demons when he's coming to win. He's a world champion, and he looked like shit in that performance against Caceres, but he's ready. So again, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how you feel. Personally, I'm here giving you my evidence on why I feel Billy Joe is a nightmare matchup for Canelo Alvarez. I love Canelo. I'm a big fan of Canelo. And even if he loses this fight, I think it's only going to help him grow more and become even a better boxer, in my opinion. But this fight, Billy Joe, I think the traveling man, the gypsy luck is going to strike. And it just has Klitschko versus Tyson Fury all over again, honestly. That's the episode for today, and enjoy.